Hey everyone, Dr. Fibonacci back with you. Today I want to show you how to build a map visualization in Looker Studio, which is another free tool from Google. That's part of Google's data platform, along with some tips and tricks and ways to keep it really cost effective as well. So once again, we're going to start here in Google BigQuery and look at the same data set we looked at in the last video, which was that data from the EPA. That's the smoke in the air, particulate matter 2.5 microns in size. We're looking at the hourly readings from the monitoring stations all around the country. There's about 600 stations in all 50 states. So I'm going to choose this PM25 form hourly table again. And just by way of review, if we take a look at the table details, we can see it's got 48 million rows in it, and it's 11 gigabytes in size. So with BigQuery, especially if you're working in a personal account, we always want to be conscious of potential cost. In this case, BigQuery allows you to query up to 1 terabyte of data for free. That's 1,000 gigabytes. So 11 gigabytes, we can query it many times before we get out of the free tier. After that, the cost is $6.25 a terabyte. So we do want to be conscious of it if we're working with those larger data sets. And I'll show you a technique here in a little bit, which we can use to keep that under control. But back to our data set here. If we have a quick preview of the data, we can see there's a lot of stuff in here. Site code, site number, county code, parameter code, all these things. You know what? We don't really need all this data. All we really care about is the sample measurement, the timestamp associated with the measurement, and the state name, right? And that will allow us to do a map-based visualization where we can see the air quality by state at different times. So we've got a couple options here. We could just extract the data into a temporary table, or we could extract the data and just go directly into Looker Studio from here. But let's do it the easiest way first, and then work into the slightly more complicated ways that are going to be a little more cost effective. So the easy way, if we start with our table here, we're looking at the whole table right now. Just click Open in and Looker Studio. And so this will launch Looker Studio in a new browser tab. And it's going to build a couple of visualizations for us that it thinks we might be interested in from this data. We can see here it's chosen for a state code and parameter code. Those things don't really mean anything to me. Same thing on the right. So I don't like its choice of defaults very well. But we can quickly change this to do more interesting things. So maybe we want to see what's the average sample measurement by state. So we could just click on this first graph or chart here and then come over to the right side. Now, Looker Studio is a completely visual tool, no code required. So we have a bunch of different chart types. We'll get into those here in a minute. For starters, it's just chosen a table for us. And then the way we configure each chart is using this first column here, the setup tab. It gives us our data source up here at the top, which is our table name from BigQuery. And right now it's chosen a date range dimension for us. We're not going to worry about that for a minute. We don't need it right now. It's also chose some other dimensions. These are just the columns in our table. State code doesn't mean anything. Let's change it to be a state name. So I'll just type a little bit of state here and choose state name. And then county code, I'm not really interested in that. I'm more interested in the average sample measurement. And so to get that, what we can do is come down and look at our metric. And let's just change that. Instead of parameter code here, we'll change this to sample measurement. And instead of the sum, which is the default, we're going to make and look at the average. So we'll just choose average here. All right, well, now this table is a little bit more meaningful. We're looking at each state, including apparently country of Mexico. Didn't realize we had monitoring stations there, but apparently we do. And the sample measurement values. And it seems to be sorted from the highest to lowest. In fact, if we look over here in the column, we can see that. Our sort order is the average of our sample measurement in descending order, so it puts the highest at the top. In this case, lower is better. So let's just change that to ascending order and see what our least contaminated state is, Wyoming, actually, with an average measurement across the years of data in here of 3.98. Now, beware as I'm doing these things, this is not a rigorous scientific analysis because a lot of that would depend on, do we have complete data sets? Do we have the same number of measurements from each station for the period of time we're looking at? Where are these stations? Are they in populated areas, remote areas, et cetera? There's a lot of factors that could be involved here. I'm just trying to show you how you build reports, not necessarily do rigorous analysis of these things. All right, this graph on the right, let's just start over completely with this one. It's not doing a lot for me because what we really want to get to is a map-based visualization anyway. So I'm even going to delete this first chart so I have more room for a map. So we'll go up to the top menu bar here and say add a chart. And I scroll down and I see there seem to be several different map types available. What I'd like is a map showing a color for each state based on the overall levels in that state. So to do that, we're going to click here on the filled map chart type, and we can just drag and drop here to put it in our page. Now over here on the right, you notice there's a red bar. It says invalid dimension. Well, which dimension do I really want here? I want a state name so that I can have it show me a color for each state based on the pollution levels in that state. So let's come down here to state name. First, we'll click on the bar to try to change it. It doesn't seem to think that anything in here is a valid location type field that the map can use. And this is one of those little gotchas when you first get into Looker Studio that can catch you. So let me show you where to change this so we have a valid field to look at. Up here at the top under data source, it's not obvious at first, but if you hover over the hexagon here, it becomes editable. We need to edit our data source in order to tell Looker Studio that we have a location field. So I'm going to go ahead and click the pencil here. That now brings up a list of all our fields coming from the table in BigQuery. If we scroll down a little bit here, we can see we have the state name field, and it is a text type field. But to use this for a map, we need to change this to a location type field. So we're just going to select it here and come down under Geo. And this is not a country, but it's not a state. Here's country subdivision first level. So Google Maps component in Looker Studio can work in many different countries, but countries call the political divisions many different things, provinces, states, etc. So country subdivision first level is going to be our state. So we'll choose that. So our state name is now recognized as a geotype that represents the country division first level. Now, if I come back here and click on the invalid bar for location again, I see now I do in fact have a state name. So I click that and voila, we get a map. Let's zoom in a little bit. Sorry, Alaskans, we're going to focus on the lower 48 for this to make it visually more interesting. Wouldn't it be nice if we could do a green, yellow, red kind of color coding like we did in Google Sheets? Yeah, let's do that. So for that, we're going to click on the other tab, which is Style. All right, so scroll down a little bit. We have some colors we can use. So let's just make it red, yellow, and green. And it's automatically choosing for us the ranges of the colors just based on the whole color scale, which you can see here down below. Right now, it looks like we're looking at record count as our metric, not our average sample measurement value. So let's do that next. Go back to the Setup tab and scroll down a little bit. And our color metric here, we don't want it to be the total record count for each state. California has the most monitoring stations, so they, of course, have the highest number of records in this data set. Instead, let's use the sample measurement value. And we don't want the sum, we want the average sample measurement value because some states have a lot more than others. All right, now this map is starting to look a little bit reasonable. So we've got measurements for every state over the last 20 or so years that are in this data. And sure enough, Wyoming, like we saw earlier in the chart, is the greenest here because it does have the lowest amount of particulate matter 2.5 in the air. All right, we want to look at time here as well. Time is important to this. So in order to do that, we've got to do a couple things. First, I'm going to actually move this whole component if I can. There we go. We'll just move it down the page a little bit. And let's put up a selector where we can choose the particular year that we want to look at this data. So for that, I could use a date control because we do have dates in this data set for every single day. However, if I want to look at year, there's actually going to be an easier way because the date control is complicated. And choosing an entire year's worth of data using a date control means I'm going to have to go pick like January 1st, 2021, and then pick December 31st, 2021 to set my date range. It'd be a lot easier if I could just choose a specific year via dropdown. So let's add a control here that's just a dropdown list. Instead of state name, we're going to choose the date local field, which gives us our dates. And then furthermore, I'm going to click the edit pencil and tell it that we only want to look at years. So we'll say this is date time year. And now we get a drop-down list in some order. Doesn't look like the greatest order of the years. Maybe we can change that. For the control field here, we come down to the sort order, and let's just make this descending by date local year. We come back. All right, now we're looking at 2024 first and going on back. So let's choose a particular year here, like 2021, and see what things look like. All right, a little different. Some more yellow regions in there. Things are looking a little different than the all years. If I want to unselect the year, then I can either just come in here and unselect the checkbox, or I can click this little minus sign in the upper left corner of the dropdown. And that'll take me back to looking at all years. If I unselect again, now I'm not looking at any years worth of data. Let's go back. I see one other problem over here on the right. Let's go into 2024. In order for the date control to affect this graph, we need to ensure that the date range dimension is set correctly. That's what Looker uses. That's the field it's going to use to say, okay, how do we filter the results of the map for this specific year? And right now that's not set correctly. Our date range dimension is set to site number, which has no meaning here. So let's change that also to be date local. And now it knows to filter our results by the year selected. It seems I've also selected a state accidentally as well. So let me back that out by hitting this little reset arrow in the upper left. And that should take me back to my full visualization. Maybe I can try reset again. I'm not sure why I'm not seeing a color scale. Let's make sure I've got all my metrics correct. So date local, state name, average sample measurement. You know what? Let's just try a page refresh. I hate that this works, but it does sometimes. You shouldn't have to hit page refresh while you're building graphs to make things work. And it went all the way back to the beginning and we lost all of that. Pretty annoying. All right, lost a little bit of work there and had to rebuild it, but we're back to where we were with the map. And that's a good reminder, especially when you're working with query results from BigQuery. It's a good idea to come up here and click this button every now and then, the save and share, so you don't lose your work in progress. So I'm just going to go ahead and click acknowledge and save here. And now I've at least got a copy of my work that in case I have another problem, I can safely hit refresh and not lose everything. All right, so we've got things colored by state. We were adding in the time dropdown. So let's go do that again. All right, there we go. Let's try to click on 2024 again now. Okay, now that's starting to look a little different. If we click on this, double check, date range dimension is still wrong. Let's fix that. This should be date local. All right, and that was 2024. Let's see what 2021 looks like. All right, I think we've got it all hooked up correctly. So let's move on. One of the neat capabilities of Looker Studio is the ability to cross-link the different components. And we've already seen that, how the filter can change the graph below. Let's do it one more time here. We'll just choose 2018. And you can see the colors change. 2018, there must not have been many wildfires. It looks like a much better year on average. So let's say I would like to see the trends for a particular state, and I'd like to be able to just click on a state in the map to select that. I can actually do that. So let's shrink up the map visualization here just a little bit. So we have room for another bar chart. We'll go to add a chart here, and we'll select a bar chart type. There we go. And what I'd like to see is the sample measurement average values. It's already guessed at sample measurement, but it's doing the sum. So we're going to change that to average. The date range dimension, let's go ahead and fix that as well. And then for our dimension, instead of looking at it by state, I want to look at it by year. So I'm going to change this field to be our date local. And I'm going to go in. Actually, let's look at it by month. So we'll go in and change it to date and time, and we'll look at the month. We already have a year selector up above. And then let's put our chart in order by the months in ascending order. So we think in calendar terms. You notice it stops at October over here. That's because graphs by default put 10 bars on. We can fix that over here on the Style tab. We'll just go over and increase the number of bars. And now we can see all 12 months in the year. So this is now looking at all the states you see here colored. We're looking at, for a particular year, 2018, the average values of across the entire US by month for that year. Now we can start drilling in and doing fun stuff. All right, so let's choose a different year first. Let's go to 2021. Because that was a heavy wildfire year. And sure enough, we see those wildfire bars over here. July and August were the wildfire months. And so those are a lot higher than typical for those months. I can even now select a particular state. So let's select Colorado. And Colorado was particularly bad that year. I know, I lived there then. And we can see that very clearly in the data. So I don't have to do anything special. I didn't write any code. This Looker Studio lets me link up all the components, whether it's the drop downs, filters, or charts and graphs, even map visualizations are clickable, and they cause other things on the page to update. Now we can disable that behavior as well. There's a link at the bottom. Let's see, it's back on the setup tab that says cross filtering. You can turn that off for a particular graph. And then when you click on something in the graph, it won't cause filtering to happen on the other components on the page. Right, so that's just a little fun with Looker Studio. Let's go back into BigQuery now and look at our data usage and think about that a little more. So this query I mentioned was 11 gigabytes in size to read in the entire table. And we are doing that because in Looker Studio, we have all these fields available. So we've just pointed it to the entire table. So what we might want to do is instead just select a subset of that data. So we'll go back over here and write a little query against this table where we only pull in the fields that we actually need. Because BigQuery is a columnar data store, if you don't select a column, then you don't get charged for reading that column. I'm going to use my little trick here, Control-click, to open another tab that will show me the schema. And then I'll use the little down arrow here to split this tab over to the right so I can see the schema for the table alongside my query. And we really only care about 3 fields here. We care about the date local timestamp, care about our sample measurement, and we care about our state name. So I just click on those fields and it's added then to the query. I can use Control-Shift-F here to pretty print the query and make it a little bit more readable. And I'm going to come down and remove this limit with Control-Shift-K. Just delete those 2 lines because I don't actually need them. I actually want to read all the data. Now, if I come up here to the right and look at the query validator, cursor's making it a little hard to see, but this query will now process only 1.19 gigabytes instead of the full 11 gigabytes in the table. So here I have two options to get this into Looker Studio. I could just take one query result and feed that to Looker Studio. So I run this query here. And then as soon as it completes, I'm going to choose open in. Should show up here momentarily. Right, there's our query results with just the 3 columns. So now we can open in Looker Studio. That'll launch a new tab, and it'll give me just those 3 columns available over here. I'm still going to have to go in and change the state name to be a location type field and do those things again. But it's a much smaller data set we're working with. So now every time I change a filter, change the dropdown to select a different year, and it goes to BigQuery, every time it does that, I'm getting charged for a smaller amount of data ingest to run that query. The one difficulty is that when I choose a particular chart here and I look at the data source, it's a little difficult to understand where it came from if I'm just exporting a single query result. So if I click edit connection here and I come back, I can see my dataset name is this underscore CC8B73. It's a random identifier, and the table name is also a random identifier. This actually identifies the temporary dataset that BigQuery put into memory in order to give these results and drive Looker Studio. Another problem with this is that these temporary datasets are going to go away, and then your Looker Studio report would stop working altogether. So this is not the best way. We really always want to connect Looker Studio to a permanent table in BigQuery. The other option for us here then, I'm going to close this out again, is to take this extracted data here, just 3 columns, and put it into a new table in my project in this case. And then I'll use that table to drive Looker Studio. So to do that, when I'm writing my query here, I just come up to the 3 dots menu, select more, query settings, and set a destination table for my query. I'll type a little bit of my dataset name here called demo. We'll give this a name like PM25 extract, and then click save. So you now see a bar show up at the bottom of the query window that shows we have a destination table, and it's PM25ext. Now when I run this query, it's going to populate that BigQuery table with the data, about 1 gigabyte of data. And so I can now point Looker Studio at this table. All right, so let's go ahead and look at it. Here's PM25_ext. If I look at the table details here, I see it's 1.1 gigabyte, exactly what we were expecting. So now I can just open this entire table in Looker Studio by choosing Open In, Looker Studio. And once again, I have a new tab, but that tab is now connected to my own table, which has an extract of just the columns that I need. That's just a technique you can use to keep your costs down in BigQuery. Typically, you should be reporting using some kind of roll-up or aggregate data, or in this case, pre-filtered data where we've selected out certain columns. And you can see we've only got those 3 columns over here. As always, thanks for watching. And if you have other topics you'd like to see about Looker Studio or anything in the Google Big Data platform, please put them in the comments below.